Last year, ESPN graced its audience with a magnificent 30 for 30 special on one of wrestling's all-time greats, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. We laughed along at the stories of Flair's wildman antics, while also considering the pitfalls and troubles that his life and choices brought him. It's one of pro wrestling's most revealing portraits, showing every diamond and every wart possessed by Flair. Throughout the documentary, several of his in-ring peers strongly emphasized how much Flair did for them between the ropes, giving them the matches of their life. And it wasn't through acrobatic stunts or convoluted sequences, but instead an emphasis on selling, acting, and psychology. Flair knew exactly how to madden an audience with his gloating demeanor and how to make any opponent look like Superman at his own expense. Flair could play a valiant hero, fighting like hell against overpowering odds, but his forte was deftly playing the scheming bastard, whose loss of blood only made the audience happy. The following list is Flair's finest work, and we here at Cultaholic are assuming plenty of risk in revealing it because there is so much that we had to leave out. But consider this the primer of absolute must-see Ric Flair matches, and individually, they all go a long way in defining his untouchable in-ring greatness. I'm Jack from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 Ric Flair matches you need to see. Join us! Number 10, Ric Flair vs. Harley Race, Starrcade 1983. Ric Flair as a sympathetic babyface chasing after the world title that was held by a grizzled brute like Harley Race was a highly effective story, even if it was a little bit weird to see Flair as the young and gallant hero. Of course, most of us prefer for our Nature Boy to be of the kiss-stealing, wheeling-dealing variety, though he's admittedly a damn good guy as well. Flair fought back from an attack at the hands of Cowboy Bob Orton and Dick Slater, both of whom had collected a bounty placed on Flair by Harley Race, who was attempting to wipe out his biggest challenger. As for the match itself, which took place inside of a steel cage, it's a bit slower than perhaps today's fans would be accustomed to, but it's some gritty storytelling. A tale of a man who refuses to accept defeat, even as the sadistic champion batters him bloody. It's the sort of match that we imagine makes Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder sigh wistfully. Number 9, Ric Flair vs. Lex Luger, Starrcade 1988. In terms of wrestlers that had their best matches with Ric Flair, that brings us to the total package, a wrestler that sometimes gets written off as stiff and mechanical when he was far better than most criticism would admit. There was no denying that when Luger shared the ring with Flair, that Lex had his absolute best matches because nobody could sell his supercharged muscle man comebacks quite like a horrified and stunned Nature Boy. In what is probably the best singles match of Luger's career, he vied for Flair's NWA World title the night after Christmas 1988, falling just short when his knee gave out on him. It was 30 minutes of virtually no resting and no standing around, a clash of two different titans fighting for one of the richest prizes in the game. And Flair gave Luger the star treatment in more than one sense. Reportedly, Flair was meant to have won cleanly, but decided on his own to cheat in order to give Luger an out, affording his opponent some remnant strength. Number 8, Ric Flair vs. Triple H, Survivor Series 2005. Make no mistake about it, although much older, the Flair that we saw in his final WWE run from 2001 till 2008 had some truly inspired moments. He could have matches that reminded you of the unparalleled genius that he demonstrated in his prime, but mostly, he did have a ceiling. Flair had reached his 50s, and while he could still supersede the performances of men 25 years younger, the 5-star matches were firmly in his rear view. However, this was the closest Flair would come to past perfection, and it was close indeed. Also, it came against one of his biggest fans in the business. Flair and Triple H beat the absolute hell out of one another in a last man standing match before an astonished crowd in Detroit, Michigan. Though the story wasn't exactly a firm one, there was something beautiful about the way that these two fused Attitude Era style bloodbaths with a throwback duel between two proud gunslingers. Flair's selling and theatrics added so much to what could have been just another WWE style brawl in a series of them, and it's a shame that this match sometimes doesn't get the love that it deserves. Number 7, Ric Flair vs. Bret Hart, October 12th, 1992. This was the changing of the guard, and sadly, it happened at a live event. WWE was going in a new direction at the time, putting champions like Savage, Hogan, and Flair himself in the past, while moving forward with the excellence of execution as the top dog. At 43 years of age, Flair may not have meshed with what Vince McMahon saw as his younger and hipper new wave, but he could still undeniably go at a super high level. And while Bret Hart and Ric Flair haven't always had the kindest words about one another in the past, this match is tremendous. Yes, this match has since been made available online, and we suggest that you seek it out. Though his WWE career wasn't always the best representation of what Flair could do as a masterful ring general, he and Hart delivered an epic title change that greatly thrilled fans in Saskatoon, building to an exciting finish where Hart won with his sharpshooter. The two would also have Iron Man matches on house shows, with a January 93 match in Boston being covertly recorded by a naughty fan. That match, along with this famous title change, are probably the best examples of Flair living up to his godly reputation while inside a WWE ring. Number 6, Ric Flair vs. Vader, Starrcade 1993. You could not have packed this match with any more story elements. Flair, aged 44, waged his career against the monstrous Vader's WCW Championship. Vader had reigned with the belt for the majority of the previous year, with seemingly no antidote to his brutish strength. He was also backed by Harley, the man Flair had beaten for the gold at Starrcade some 10 years earlier. The match was taking place in Flair's native of Charlotte, North Carolina, giving him a needed home court advantage as his family and friends were among the assembled throng. And did we mention as well, yes we did, that Flair's career was on the line. If you want to see storytelling at its rawest and most emotional, watch as Flair takes Vader's heaviest blows and somehow keeps on moving forward, slowly but surely overtaking the match, slaying the beast to an insane crowd response. It's a tearjerker of the highest quality, a match that sucks you into the drama, one of the absolute best David vs. Goliath stories you'll ever see inside a wrestling ring. Number 5, Ric Flair vs. Sting, Clash of the Champions, March 27th, 1988. Of all the wrestlers on that 30 for 30 documentary that detailed how Flair helped their careers, Sting was the most gracious. Up until 88, Sting was considered a pretty solid performer with a great look and obvious charisma, but he wasn't quite the icon that would cement his legacy within the business. What followed was a prime example of how just one match can absolutely make somebody, and that Flair was just the man to get the job done. Flair put an incredible amount of equity into the Stinger when he went to a 45-minute draw with him on the inaugural episode of Clash of the Champions, putting the 29-year-old ex-bodybuilder on the same level as himself. It would take 2 more years for Sting to finally get his own run as NWA WCW champion, but the perception of Sting from this match was that he was star material, and he had proven it with an incredible performance inside the ring. This perhaps explains why Sting was so happy to put over just how much Flair had made him into an even better wrestler through their work together. Number 4, Ric Flair vs. Terry Funk, Clash of the Champions 9, New York Knockout. The hazard of putting together a list of Ric Flair's greatest matches is realizing what gets left out. The absence of Flair and Funk's NWA World Title match from the 1989 Great American Bash only reveals the difficulty of making such lists. But ultimately, that's okay, because while that great match gets omitted, their even better match from cable TV makes up for the prior bout's absence. Flair and Funk had warred for more than 6 months, with heinous acts like pile drivers onto tables and attempted suffocation with plastic bags underscoring the hatred that existed between the two. The feud was blown off with an I quit stipulation that saw Flair match the violent intensity of his angry Texas foe. Flair relished dishing it out to Funk in return, ultimately breaking the Funker's spirit with a painful figure 4 leg lock. This was one of the best examples of a blow-off where the hero neutralizes the villain's strongest qualities by simply outdoing them at their own game. And watching Flair out-brutalize Terry Funk was quite poetic. Number 3, the Barry Windham trilogy. Yes, we've cheated here, but it was a necessary cheat. A man like Barry Windham seemed to have it all: size, in-ring ability, boyish good looks, and aggressive demeanor, all necessary qualities when searching for the next big thing as a main event star. And make no mistake about it, Barry Windham has a highly impressive resume between the ropes, in many ways ahead of his time as a worker. And yet, like so many of his era, his best matches came against future Horseman teammate Ric Flair. In the first of 3 genuine 5-star matches for the NWA title, Flair fought Windham to a 41-minute double countout at NWA's Battle of the Belts 2 in February 1986. More than 1 year later, they followed up with a time-limit draw on an episode of Worldwide that Windham almost won. Finally, Flair vanquished Windham at the second day of the April 1987 Crockett Cup, pinning Windham with a handful of tights to keep his gold. It's one of wrestling's best trilogies ever, but not the best on this list. More on that later on. Number 2, the 1992 Royal Rumble. Usually, yes, we like to limit these videos to one-on-one matches only, and maybe the odd triple threat thrown in here and there. But in this instance, an exception just had to be made. With the WWE Championship at stake for all 30 hungry men, number 3 entrant Ric Flair had to survive an hour to fulfill all of his previous boasts, thereby reaching his destiny. In the process, he took a perpetual ass-kicking from each ensuing entrant, but remained largely undeterred in his quest. Simply put, it's the greatest one-man performance in Royal Rumble history. If Flair were to get a Best Actor Oscar for his performance, then certainly Bobby Heenan would earn Best Supporting Actor for his frazzled, desperate commentary in which he pleads with God to let Flair win. Heenan's panic is hilarious and convincing every time a new entrant of some renown hits the ring, and Flair takes a pounding from all of them. It's the most rewatchable Rumble match ever, along with maybe 2001, and maybe the best continuous hour of WWE programming that's ever been produced. And finally, number 1, the Ricky Steamboat trilogy. Flair is to Steamboat what Joker is to Batman, the perfect foil, and vice versa. And yes, we have to point out that Flair and Steamboat have faced off more than just these 3 times, 3,000 times is probably closer to reality, but their years-long stop-and-start rivalry usually boils down to these 3 matches in the minds of many. When Steamboat made his return to the NWA in January 1989, greatness with Flair Flair awaited, but even their biggest fans would be surprised at just how great. Steamboat took the NWA title from Flair at the Chi-Town Rumble, a 23-minute match that would have been 1989's best match if both men had decided to retire there and then. And it still might have been, depending on how you feel about their 55-minute 2 out of 3 falls match at the 6th Clash of Champions that April. And if that wasn't enough, a month later Flair took more than 30 minutes to eke out the win over Steamboat at the Wrestle War pay-per-view, reclaiming his lost belt in the process. If you think Omega vs. Okada is the premier trilogy in wrestling, then go back in time and see what our old friend Nage cooked up against the Dragon. It certainly makes for an interesting debate. And also, there's an obvious reason why these 3 matches have remained a gold standard. So that's our list. Make sure to leave your favourite Ric Flair matches in the comment section down below. Thank you very much for watching this video. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. You can follow me on Twitter here. You can follow all of us generally as well at Cultaholic, and check out our Patreon too, patreon.com/Cultaholic. And never forget, of course, if you haven't already, to hit subscribe and to join us.